Marvin Gaye was visiting his parents' home here in Los Angeles. There was a family argument. The singer was shot in the chest. A little while later, Marvin Gaye died.
The coroner found that Michael Jackson died from acute intoxication of propofol.
Have you ever thought that the legends on stage, those who once shone brightly, captivating the world with their beauty and talent, would eventually fade away in tragic scenes so grim you wouldn't dare look twice? They were once vibrant icons of culture, music, and film, but at the end of their lives, they vanished quietly in pitiful states beyond imagination. Some died in handcuffs, their skin pale as a corpse left unburied. Others were abandoned in filthy apartments, their bodies curled up on cold floors. Some legends, who sold millions of records, ended their days with peeling skin, hair falling out in clumps, and bodies so frail they looked like they'd just escaped a refugee camp. The 19 stories I'm about to tell will reveal the horrifying truth hidden behind the glamorous photos of the entertainment world. Brace yourself, because what you're about to see will send chills down your spine and completely change how you view them. 19. Sammy Davis Jr. The spotlight fades in poverty and a ravaged body. Sammy Davis Jr. was once a multi-talented icon in American entertainment. He sang, danced, and acted as if he was born to conquer the stage. As part of the legendary Rat Pack, Sammy once lit up Las Vegas with his name alone. But behind the bright lights and applause was a life riddled with challenges. On May 16, 1990, the man who was once a symbol of glamour and charisma took his last breath in his bedroom in a Beverly Hills home, once a luxurious mansion, now up for sale to pay off debts. He died owing $15 million. His family was forced to sell everything, from furniture to the memorabilia of a legend, to settle the debts. Once living like a king in Las Vegas casinos, Sammy left this world penniless. But that wasn't the worst of it. The official cause of death was throat cancer, and Sammy's passing marked the collapse of a body worn down to its core. In his final years, he was no longer himself. Chemotherapy left him bald, his skin dry and pale, unrecognizable to those who once idolized him. The eyes that once symbolized resilience after a near-fatal accident in 1954 were now lifeless and cloudy. His body was so frail that his clothes no longer fit, his face gaunt, cheeks sunken, as if all vitality had been drained. Many say he was killed by his own fame. The pressure to always shine, to overcome racism and prejudice, pushed him into alcohol, drugs, and endless partying. When his body gave out, debts piled up, and the crowds that once cheered him vanished. Death came as a bitter, inevitable end. Sammy once said, "If I die on stage, let me die while the audience is still clapping." But the truth is, he died quietly, alone, surrounded by cold walls and unpaid debts. 18. Nat King Cole, a legend's body, wasted away in pain. Nat King Cole was the voice that captivated America. Unforgettable Mona Lisa, Smile, his timeless songs still echo today. Not just a jazz legend, Nat was the first black artist to have his own TV show, breaking barriers in an America steeped in racial segregation. But behind that glory was a life eroded by cigarettes, stage pressure, and unspoken loneliness. In the end, he passed at just 45, too young for such a towering name. By August 1964, he was bedridden at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. Lung cancer had spread throughout his body. He could no longer speak, play the piano, or sing. His skin was ashen, cracked, with dark patches from oxygen deprivation. His body was so emaciated it hurt to look at him, ribs protruding, every slight movement causing agony. His hair was nearly gone, leaving only sparse gray strands on a blotchy scalp. His face was sunken, cheeks hollow, the eyes that once charmed millions now devoid of life. Those close to him said his hands trembled uncontrollably, unable to hold even simple objects. The elegance and charm that made him an icon were gone. All that remained was a frail, ravaged body, exhausted by chemotherapy, endless pain, and irreversible mistakes. Poor management and unchecked spending led to a financial collapse. Once an A-list star, in his final moments, he couldn't even afford a dignified funeral. On February 15, 1965, he took his last breath in a hospital room. The man who uplifted an entire community died with an unfinished career, shaky finances, and a body so broken it was heartbreaking. Nat King Cole was once America's dream, but his end was a nightmare that lingered until his final breath. 17. Billie Holiday, the jazz queen, died handcuffed and penniless. Billie Holiday was the queen of dark, soulful jazz with a voice no one could replicate. Strange Fruit made her an icon of resistance, but her life was a relentless chain of tragedies. From an abused childhood to being exploited by managers, then falling into addiction and societal rejection. Billie was the epitome of someone celebrated when they shone, then abandoned the moment they stumbled. In her final days, no one cared how long she lay motionless in a New York hospital bed. Her skin was yellow as dry straw, her face swollen, yet her body so thin that any dress looked like it was hanging on a coat rack. Her arms were covered in bruises and needle scars, her skin rough from botched injections that festered and burst. The face that once enchanted countless men was now bloated from fluid retention. Her hair was matted, unwashed for weeks. Her lips were cracked, teeth stained, her speech slurred. Her body was skeletal, her back sunken into the mattress from lying still for so long. The peak of her misery came when police stormed her hospital room and handcuffed her to the bed. The reason? Heroin found in her room. A legend was arrested while on her deathbed. Her body was a mere shell, organs failing, heart barely beating, liver nearly shut down. Yet they cuffed her like a dangerous criminal. No lawyer, no family, no defense, and not a penny to her name. On July 17, 1959, Billie Holiday took her final breath, handcuffed, curled up, too weak to resist. No fame, no fortune, no one to fight for her justice. All that remained was a voice that once shook America, and the curled-up corpse of a woman who endured far too much injustice from childhood to her final days. Perhaps Billie didn't die from addiction. She died because society choked the life out of her until her very last breath. 16. Whitney Houston, a legendary diva, drowned in a bathtub. Whitney Houston was the irreplaceable queen of pop and R&B. With a golden voice, 6 Grammys, and iconic hits like I Will Always Love You, she brought the world to tears. But life off stage was a prolonged nightmare, drowning in drugs, scandals, and despair. On February 11, 2012, just hours before a pre-Grammy party, Whitney Houston was found unconscious in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. The scene was so horrific it haunted those who saw it. The bathwater had turned murky, surrounded by scattered sedatives, drug paraphernalia, and signs of a life spiraling out of control. Her body was half submerged, her face was purple, her nails were broken, her eyes were wide open. No one could believe a diva who once shook the global stage would end like this. Her body was already warped by years of drug use and chronic illness. Her skin was sallow, her frame so thin her shoulders and ribs protruded. Her teeth were yellowed, some loose, her eyes cloudy, stripped of the allure they once held. Even her divine voice was a memory, her final years marked by an inability to sing a full song. Her breathing was weak, her voice broken, her mind clouded. The scars on her arms, marks of injections, told the story. The coroner's report confirmed her death was caused by a mix of drugs, sedatives, and heart disease, a heart worn to its limit. It wasn't just an overdose, it was a life pushed to the edge. A legend died alone as the world prepared to celebrate new stars, as if they'd forgotten the one who paved the way. The haunting legacy of her death lingers on. 15. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, died of a drug overdose, body disfigured, at 50. Michael Jackson was a phenomenon unmatched in music history. With Thriller, Bad, Black or White, he shook the world, earning the title King of Pop with hundreds of millions of records sold. Everyone knew the moonwalk. Everyone heard his mesmerizing voice. But behind the curtain was a Michael in pain, isolated, addicted to drugs, and hounded by lawsuits, debts, and disfiguring plastic surgeries. On the morning of June 25, 2009, Michael was found unconscious in his rented Los Angeles mansion. His heart had stopped, no pulse. His personal doctor, Conrad Murray, attempted CPR in a panic, but it was too late. Michael died in his bed, still in pajamas, needle marks on his arm, his body cold. The autopsy shocked the world. Propofol, a powerful anesthetic used only in surgeries, was injected into his veins, along with a cocktail of sedatives. This wasn't an accident. It was manslaughter. At the time, Michael was pushing himself to rehearse for the This Is It tour, his last hope to salvage his crumbling finances. Debts reached hundreds of millions. His mansion wasn't his assets were pawned, and legal troubles from abuse allegations trapped him in paranoia and drug dependency. He couldn't sleep without anesthetics. He couldn't perform without anti-anxiety meds. His appearance was a shock. His nose was completely deformed, collapsed, held together with tape. His skin was ghostly white, patchy, his wig askew, ribs protruding like a walking skeleton. Once a beauty icon, he was now a shadow of himself. Michael Jackson's death seemed like a peaceful end, slipping into a drug-induced sleep, but it was anything but a bitter full stop to a legendary yet tragedy-laden life. 14. Marvin Gaye, soul legend, shot dead by his own father in a state of collapse, addiction, and ruin. Marvin Gaye was the heart of American soul music. With What's Going On and Sexual Healing, he didn't just change how people felt music, he became a cultural icon for a generation. His honeyed voice and seductive charm captivated the world. But the more famous he became, the more chaotic his life grew. On April 1, 1984, one day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye was killed in his parents' home, shot in the chest at close range. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a stranger's plot. His own father, Marvin Gaye Sr., pulled the trigger. Their argument erupted that morning, with Marvin, high on drugs, raging at his father over financial mismanagement and meddling in his personal life. Shouts, destruction, threats. Then a single gunshot. Marvin Gaye fell, never to rise again. By then, Marvin was no longer himself. He lived in paranoia, fearing surveillance, plagued by insomnia. Cocaine and alcohol had ravaged his body to the core. His face was gaunt like a living corpse, eyes sunken with dark circles like bruises. His skin was pale, speckled with rashes. His body was so thin, his clothes hung loosely. His hands and feet were marked with green veins and bruises. His hair was sparse, tangled like a bird's nest. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it was a faint echo of the legend who once melted millions of hearts. Marvin was living with his parents, drowning in debt, evading taxes, homeless and assetless. His career had collapsed, his marriage had crumbled, his mental state was unstable. His death was the final straw in a life already rotting from within. Marvin Gaye, the man who sang the most beautiful love songs, fell in a state of utter physical and mental ruin. 13. Etta James. The R&B queen died wasted, ravaged by illness, body unrecognizable. Etta James was an icon of blues and R&B, silencing the world with her powerful voice in At Last. Her career spanned over half a century, winning hearts with her commanding presence. But her life sank into addiction, illness, and prolonged suffering. On January 20th, 2012, Etta James took her final breath at Parkview Hospital, California. Her death came after years of battling brutal diseases: leukemia, hepatitis C, diabetes, kidney failure, and dementia. Once radiant on stage, Etta lay motionless in a hospital bed, too weak to speak clearly or recognize loved ones. Her body was no longer that of a diva. Her skin was jaundiced, ashen, rough with bruises from constant injections. Her hair fell out in patches, and she wore a wig that often slipped, exposing a cracked, desert-like scalp. Her body was swollen from kidney failure, her limbs heavy, each step requiring assistance. Small sores on her legs wouldn't heal, spreading due to diabetic complications. It was as if her body was consuming itself day by day. Before her death, Etta was under the complete control of a guardian and nurses. She had no say over her money, and her career was nearly forgotten. In her final years, she had moments of clarity, only to realize she was living in poverty, isolation, and a body imprisoned by illness. In the end, Etta James, the queen of old, fell after a battle that only death could end. 12. Rick James. The super freak legend. Died silently, body wasted by drugs and scandal. Rick James was the king of funk, making the world dance to Super Freak and countless hits. He ruled the 1980s stage with rebellious flair, fiery music, and an unforgettable persona. But that same rebellion drowned his life. On the morning of August 6, 2004, Rick James was found dead in his bed at his Los Angeles home. He was 56. The death was sudden but unsurprising to those who knew how far he'd fallen. His body was a wreck of disease and devastation, a remnant of decades of heavy cocaine use. The autopsy revealed traces of at least 9 substances in his blood, from cocaine and meth to painkillers and antidepressants. His body could no longer take it. 2 years before his death, Rick no longer resembled the star who topped Billboard charts. His face was bloated, wrinkled, with deep dark circles from insomnia and nerve damage. His skin was gray, dotted with red sores from long-term drug side effects. His once iconic long braids were thin and matted. He struggled to walk, his back hunched, legs shaky, hands trembling uncontrollably. His body looked like that of a 90-year-old man, though he was barely in his 50s. After multiple arrests for assault, kidnapping, and drug scandals, Rick James was shunned by Hollywood and the music industry. His wealth vanished with lawsuits, shows dried up, albums flopped, his reputation became tied to scandal rather than music. In his final years, he lived quietly in a small apartment, broke with a failing heart and no one by his side. A legend who once shone brightly ended in a silent death in the shadows. Rick James, the super freak of funk, reached the end of his self-destruction. 11. Curtis Mayfield, soul legend, died bedridden. Curtis Mayfield was a living icon of American soul and R&B. Behind timeless hits like Superfly, he was a powerful voice for the civil rights movement in music. He stood at the peak of glory, composing tirelessly, inspiring for decades. But no one could have imagined this gifted man would end his life in a scene so haunting it takes your breath away. In 1990, during a fateful performance in Brooklyn, a lighting rig collapsed, crushing him. In seconds, the legendary Curtis Mayfield was paralyzed from the neck down. Unable to perform, eat, or move on his own, he went from an international star to a man entirely dependent on others. And that was just the start of a horrifying ordeal. After the accident, he lived in constant pain, compounded by severe diabetes that further ravaged his body. He was skeletal, his cheeks sunken, his chin sharp, his hair reduced to a few thin strands clinging to his scalp. His skin was gray, cracked, covered in sores from lying in one position too long. Changing his bed sheets caused his wounds to bleed. His eyes were lifeless, sunken, with drooping lids that barely opened. On December 26, 1999, Curtis Mayfield took his last breath at 57. The official cause was complications from quadriplegia and diabetes, leading to multiple organ failure. He died quietly in a small Georgia hospital after nearly a decade of grueling struggle, exhausted and worn down day by day. Music royalties couldn't cover medical bills and equipment. His final years were marked by poverty, frailty, and the complete loss of his former glory. Curtis Mayfield was a brilliant legend, but also one crushed by a cruel twist of fate. 10. Nina Simone, the feeling-good icon, died silently in a foreign land, body unrecognizable. Nina Simone was an unmistakable voice in soul and jazz. She shook the world with Feeling Good, I Put a Spell on You, and powerful songs advocating for human rights. More than an artist, she was a warrior. But behind the glory was a chaotic life. On April 21, 2003, Nina Simone took her final breath at her home in Carry-le-Rouet, France. She died quietly in a small seaside apartment, her body ravaged by late-stage breast cancer and a mind exhausted from decades of battling mental illness. In her final days, she was no longer the commanding, powerful figure on stage. Her body was frail, her walk unsteady, her skin gray and speckled with sun damage and medication side effects. Her iconic thick hair had nearly all fallen out, leaving a bald scalp visible under a scarf. Her face lacked vitality. Her eyelids drooped heavily. Her cheeks were swollen from medication side effects. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her teeth were weak, some loose. Her trembling hands, veined and gaunt, showed the toll of age and prolonged chemotherapy. Her body seemed to scream in pain, but no one heard. She had no close family by her side in her final days. It was all due to bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, which led to erratic behavior, outbursts, destruction, even threatening. People with a gun. Her family and record labels turned away. Fans lost patience. Her finances crumbled. She lived quietly, performing small gigs to survive and cling to the remnants of her fame. When she died, Nina left no vast fortune, no grand farewell. She passed silently, just as she had been forgotten in her final years. 9. Jimi Hendrix. The guitar legend's suffocating death, ravaged by addiction and despair. Jimi Hendrix wasn't just an artist, he was a living symbol of rock's explosive era. With Purple Haze, Hey Joe, and All Along the Watchtower, he shattered music's boundaries, turning the guitar into a revolutionary weapon. The world bowed to his talent, but his life slid into a brutal darkness. September 1970. London greeted a cold, damp morning, nothing unusual. But behind the door of a small apartment in the Samarkand Hotel, Jimi Hendrix lay motionless on his bed. His body was emaciated, his skin pale gray, with faint bruises from needle marks starkly visible. His iconic afro was matted, clumped with sweat. His eyes were half closed, swollen. His face was sunken, his chin stained with white foam. His stomach was filled with a mix of barbiturates and red wine. His girlfriend found him too late. Police said he had vomited unconsciously before death, the fluid blocking his airway, cutting off his chance to survive. In a few short minutes, the rock legend slipped into suffocation and respiratory failure. His body gave up quietly, with no one there to save him. Jimi Hendrix's death wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of days drowned in alcohol, drugs, and isolation. At just 27, with his career's peak still ahead, Jimi was crushed by relentless tour schedules, binding contracts, loneliness, and an addiction he couldn't break. Poor management bled his money dry. His fiery stage presence contrasted with the wreck he became backstage. His death wasn't just a shock to music, it was proof of the utter destruction caused by unchecked fame and substances. 8. Sam Cooke. The Soul King's mysterious death in a bloody night at a Motel Sam Cooke was the uncrowned king of soul, turning his voice into a weapon and his music into a movement. A Change Is Gonna Come wasn't just a song, it was a declaration for a generation of Black Americans yearning for justice. He made record labels bow and stood shoulder to shoulder with America's greatest icons. But behind the spotlight, Sam Cooke lived in a whirlwind of financial and romantic scandals that dragged him into darkness. On the night of December 11, 1964, at the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles, Sam Cooke collapsed on a cold floor, killed by a bullet through his heart. The shooter was Bertha Franklin, the motel manager, who claimed she acted in self-defense when Cooke, in a frenzy, wearing only a jacket, stormed in shouting and breaking things. He had arrived with Elisa Boyer, a mysterious woman who later claimed he attacked her. But her story was full of holes. She fled the attacker, yet took his wallet and clothes, then vanished. Why? No explanation was given. The police closed the case in days, calling it justifiable self-defense. At his death, Sam Cooke was just 33, but he no longer looked like a star at his peak. Stress, smoking, insomnia, and a reckless lifestyle had ravaged his appearance. His face was ashen, his skin dull, his eyes sunken as if he hadn't slept in a week, his forehead etched with premature wrinkles. His hair was short, brittle, no longer sleek. His teeth, once perfect, were stained, his hands calloused and scratched. It was as if his life was a constant struggle under pressure. No one could believe the dazzling icon ended like this, alone, nearly naked, on a cheap motel floor in a pool of blood, with countless unanswered questions. Many believe Sam Cooke didn't die from impulse. He died because he stepped into shadows he should never have touched. And perhaps someone cleaned up the evidence before the light could shine. 7. Otis Redding. Motown legend died tragically in a frozen lake. Just days from glory. Otis Redding was a soul icon of the 1960s. With his thick, raspy, soulful voice, he enchanted millions with "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay." Otis wasn't just a top voice at Motown, he was the soul of the American stage. But behind the lights was a man breaking apart. On December 10, 1967, Otis Redding boarded a small plane with his band, the Bar-Kays. They were en route to a gig, exhausted from a grueling schedule. The weather was bad. Visibility was nearly zero. And then, the plane crashed into Lake Monona, Wisconsin. Almost no one survived. Otis died at 26, just steps from the pinnacle of fame. 3 days later, "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay" was released. It soared to the top of the charts, cementing his legacy. But Otis wasn't there to see it. People called it a prophetic song, written in a state of exhaustion and melancholy, wanting to rest from this world. Perhaps it wasn't just lyrics. It was his final sign of a drained artist. In his final days, Otis didn't look like a rising star. His skin was dull, his face weary with heavy dark circles. His hair was messy, with strands of gray despite being in his 20s, his lips often cracked as if he had no time to drink water. His walk was slow, shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes distant in crowds. The man who electrified stages seemed to be waiting for something, or giving up. His death was sudden, but to many it marked the end of a life drained of vitality, by pressure, money, and the very dream he chased. Had he not boarded that plane, Otis Redding might be a living legend today. But fate is cruel, and Otis remains only as a voice lingering over a frozen lake. 6. Dinah Washington, blues queen, died silently at night from a deadly cocktail of pills and alcohol. Dinah Washington was an irreplaceable voice in American blues. With her unique, powerful voice, she made what a difference a day makes timeless. From the late 1940s to the 1950s, Dinah was a studio queen, winning Grammys, selling millions of records, and earning Hollywood's respect. But behind the queen title was a life drowning in chaos, tangled romances, alcohol, pills, and sleepless nights. In her final years, Dinah was no longer the radiant queen. Empty venues, Money vanished due to reckless spending, fleeting marriages, and failed business deals. She relied on sleeping pills to escape loneliness, alcohol to fight the silence backstage. Her body visibly swelled, her face bloated, her skin grayed, with veins visible under her makeup. On stage, she wore wigs, but they often slipped, exposing a bald scalp. Her eyes were heavy, lips pale, and her smile faded. No one could believe the woman who once brought thousands to their feet was so broken. In the early hours of December 14, 1963, Dinah was found motionless in her Detroit home. Her body was cold. The diagnosis confirmed: an overdose of secobarbital, a sedative mixed with hard liquor, a lethal combination, and for her, the end. She died trying to revive her career with small gigs and unfinished recordings. But her health was gone, her spirit broken. Some say she died from an accidental overdose, but those close to her saw it as a foretold end. A body worn down daily, a soul with no escape. Dinah Washington didn't commit suicide, but it seemed she no longer had the strength to keep living. 5. Ray Charles, blind legend. Exhausted by cancer, Ray. Charles was an unmistakable icon of soul and R&B, breathing life into Georgia on My Mind and leaving an indelible mark on American music. Blind from childhood, he rose through his piano and voice, commanding the world's attention. Sadly, after years of glory, came a struggle with heroin, legal battles, mounting legal fees, and a body crumbling from liver cancer. In his final days, he lived quietly in his Beverly Hills mansion, his skin jaundiced, hair white, face sunken, and hands trembling. Cancer consumed him hourly. Ray was bedridden, nails broken, unable to play or sing. On June 10, 2004, he took his last breath at 73. The man who once brought thousands to their feet left in a silent, cold room, ending a long, exhausting battle in a body drained of life. 4. Ike Turner. Rock pioneer died of a drug overdose. Ike Turner was a pioneer of modern rock and R&B. With hits like Proud Mary, he rocked stages with Tina Turner and earned global recognition for his musical genius. But the spotlight didn't last. His life spiraled due to drugs, abuse scandals, bankruptcy, and a collapsed career. In his final years, he was a shadow of himself, his skin dark and speckled, hair sparse, face gaunt, nose red, lips cracked from decades of cocaine abuse. He was emaciated, his walk shaky, hands scarred with needle marks, living in a rundown San Marcos home. His body was lifeless, battling respiratory failure and skyrocketing blood pressure. On December 12, 2007, he was found dead from a cocaine overdose, ending the tragedy of a genius who once awed the world. Ike Turner died alone, with no one by his side. From a music trailblazer, he faded silently, as if he never existed. 3. Wilson Pickett, soul legend, died swollen and ravaged by alcohol and drugs. Wilson Pickett was a blazing star of the 60s with timeless hits like In the Midnight Hour and Mustang Sally. His voice shook the world of soul and funk, cementing him as an icon. But behind the stage was a dark life: alcoholism, drug addiction, arrests for violence. From an international star, he plummeted. In his final years, he lived in financial instability, his body swollen from heart failure, his liver severely damaged. His face was bloated, veins bulging on his forehead. His hair was short, matted. His eyes were dull with deep dark circles, lids drooping lifelessly. His legs were swollen, each step a struggle. On January 19, 2006, at a hospital in Reston, Virginia, his heart stopped, ending his physical pain. Wilson Pickett passed quietly, his body broken by alcohol, drugs, and time. 2. Richard Roundtree. Shaft icon died wasted, body skeletal from cancer. Richard Roundtree, the first black action hero on the big screen, made Hollywood take notice with his legendary role in Shaft. He was the face of the blaxploitation era, a powerful, charismatic icon. But the glory didn't last forever. In his final days, Richard was no longer the vibrant man of his prime. Metastatic pancreatic cancer drained his energy. His face was gaunt, skin jaundiced, hair white and nearly gone, with only a few strands clinging to his scalp. His body was skin and bones, ribs starkly visible. His eyes were cloudy, hands trembling, unable to hold a glass of water. On October 24, 2023, he took his last breath at his Los Angeles home in a bleak setting with shaky finances and a faded career. Only a wasted body and a once legendary name remained. A cold end for the man once hailed as the coolest man alive. 1. Barry White, R&B king, died swollen, body disfigured by kidney failure and diabetes. Barry White, with his iconic bass voice, melted millions with Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe. He was a towering figure in 70s soul and R&B, a symbol of charisma and elegance, with music that swept the globe. But at the end, everything crumbled fast. Kidney failure, diabetes, strokes, and chronic alcoholism pushed him into a pit of illness. His face was round and swollen, his neck nearly invisible. His skin was gray, speckled with small sores from chronic infections. His hair was thin, matted, exposing patches of scalp. His eyes were dull, lids swollen, nearly covering his pupils. His teeth were stained, neglected during long hospital stays. He was bedridden, barely able to move. On July 4, 2003, at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, Barry took his final breath at 58. His career was gone, his finances drained, his former glory a distant memory. His death was a wake-up call about unchecked excess, a haunting end for a once grand icon. You've just read through the 19 most haunting deaths of black stars who once lit up pop culture, but were crushed by a merciless fate in their final days. No more stage lights, no more fame, only cold bodies and untold stories. Perhaps fame was never a shield against a bitter end. If you want to share your thoughts on these stories, drop a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can take you deeper into the untold dark side of the entertainment world.